Well, good afternoon. Hello. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. This is another Dump the Corruption show. And our topic today is Jeff Bezos runs to Florida. Okay, so he ran to Florida. Anyway, of course, the first thing people think of if they find out that Jeff Bezos ran to Florida, first thing people think of is, well, Washington's got a problem. That is, Washington raised taxes, and now Jeff Bezos has decided to fly away, to become a snowbird, to go to Florida. And it's because they raise taxes. So you see, Washington, if you raise taxes on the rich, or you raise taxes on the corporation, you are going to get screwed. Okay. It's just going to go badly for you if you do that. Well, there's an article that took up this subject in Common Dreams, and I'm going to share that article right now, and it begs to differ. It begs to differ. And here we go. I see I have 3 people who are here watching, and I would appreciate it if you would say hello or something so I know who's here. That would be very nice. Anyway, we are sharing the article. It's from Common Dreams. Here's a picture of Mr. Bezos. I don't call him Jeff because I don't like him. Speaks at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts on October 20th, 2016 in San Francisco, California. Photo Michael Kumvac / Getty Images for Vanity Fair. Why use a 2016 picture when it's now 2024? Could it possibly be that he's showing his age and would not appreciate a 2024 picture? There must be lots of 2024 pictures of this guy. Bezos' move isn't an argument for not taxing local billionaires. Right-wing harumphing about the foolishness of raising taxes on the rich rests on a relative handful of high-profile anecdotes that profoundly distort the actual tax the rich story. This article is by Sam Pizzagatti, and it was published on February 26, 2024 at inequality.org first. Sam begins, I like Sam, he begins, home sweet home for Jeff Bezos, one of our planet's 3 richest human beings. The state of Washington neatly fit that description for nearly 30 years. But then this past November, Bezos suddenly announced he was moving to Miami. Why the move? In an Instagram posting, Bezos explained He wanted to be closer to his dear parents in Florida and the Cape Canaveral operations of his corporate aerospace hobby. Left unmentioned, his once beloved state of Washington, the state notorious for going easy on its richest residents at tax time, has put in place a new 7% tax on long term capital gains in excess of $250,000. By relocating to Florida, a state with no state income tax or levy on capital gains, Bezos stands to save what Time describes as, quote, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. Actually, make that billions of dollars in tax savings. Just before Washington's new tax went into effect in 2022, Florida journalist Jennifer Torres notes Bezos, quote, sold about $15.7 billion worth of Amazon stock, sidestepping approximately $1.1 billion in taxes from stock sales that would have been due under the new capital gains tax, unquote. Earlier this week, with the new tax fully in effect, the newly Miami-based Bezos finished unloading over the course of just 9 trading days another 50 million Amazon shares, saving, notes CNBC's Robert Frank, at least another $610 million. Wow. Well, he's diversifying, right? Those savings will be multiplying rapidly in the years ahead now that Bezos has resumed his annual Amazon stock trading pattern. Beginning in 1998, Frank notes, Bezos sold billions of dollars worth of shares almost every year for more than 2 decades. But the Bezos move to Miami doesn't just save the Amazon executive chairman big bucks in taxes. His exit out of Seattle gives our nation's most avid apologists for grand fortune what they see as more, quote, evidence, unquote, that any moves to raise taxes on our richest will always backfire. Jurisdictions that tax the rich, the standard conservative mantra goes, will always wind up watching their richest flee to jurisdictions that sensibly refuse to, quote, soak the rich, unquote. The over $600 million that Bezos has just saved in taxes in his most recent stock trades, Heritage Foundation Distinguished Fellow, quote unquote, Stephen Moore, the Goldie, Stephen Moore is the Goldie, exulted on social media last week, quote, further confirms the impact of taxes on relocation decisions. But right-wing harumphing about the foolishness of raising taxes on the rich. Note analysts who actually bother to study tax data rests on a relatively handful of high-profile anecdotes like the Bezos windfall that profoundly distort the actual tax the rich story. By the way, I have to add here that this doesn't apply in quite the same way to taxing the rich at the federal level, because then they wouldn't be able to run from state to state. They'd actually have to leave the United States to escape, the taxes. The other big thing that recommends tax the rich on the federal level is the increased revenue to the federal government can always be distributed to the states. I don't really want to say distributed to the states because that's not what actually happens from a real money mechanics point of view. What actually happens if you tax the rich, excessively, I shouldn't say excessively, but if you tax the rich with very high tax rates, and let's say you got another 2 trillion out of them per year, I might be exaggerating that, it might be only 1 trillion or 750 billion or something like that. If you got that out of them, what would be happening is that that tax money would be destroyed in settlement as the taxes are deposited into the Treasury general account or the Treasury spending account. However, that would create some space, some additional policy space for the Congress to then appropriate $750 billion in aid to the states. So that money could still get to the states. It wouldn't be necessary then for the states to raise taxes themselves on the rich, because the federal government would have done it and they would have distributed those gains, uh, to the states anyway. That would be a nice way to run policy and to also take away this business of a race to the bottom at the state level, where people are leaving one state because that state raises taxes and moving to another state so they could save 600 to 10 billion or 620 billion or whatever. The incentive to do that would be greatly reduced if the federal government were to increase the taxes and then appropriate, an equal amount of money to the states, where that money might be distributed across the states, um, according to need. Now, there are different ways of measuring need as it happens. I happen to work on a project at the Census Bureau first and then at the Department of Agriculture on funding formulas based on need for distributing revenue to states and to local areas. I did this during the Carter administration, and I still have the funding formulas, but of course they would be new today, I'm sure, but they could be easily redeveloped. It isn't any problem. The methodology is there. And so we would have a fair way of distributing money to the states in a new state-based, I won't call it a revenue sharing program because it's not actually revenue sharing, but a state-based program of grants to the states. Okay, so getting on with the article. So points out sociologist Christopher Young in his 2017 book, The Myth of Millionaire Tax Flight, How Place Still Matters for the Rich. The view that the, quote, freedom of movement, unquote, our richest enjoy will always undercut any move to raise more tax revenue from the rich, Young notes, has become increasingly prominent in public debates over taxes, especially at the state level, unquote. But that view, he posits, in no way reflects the actual evidence, quote unquote. Migration overwhelmingly occurs when people are establishing their careers, quote unquote. The Cornell University based Young notes, quote, people almost never move when they are at the advanced career stage, unquote. The prime reason our awesomely affluent stay put. The wealthiest among us have oodles of business and social contacts, that make them prominent, well-connected insiders where they live, unquote. The numbers back up Young's case. His research draws on data from the tax returns of every $1 million income earner in every U.S. state over 13 years, some 45 million tax records in all. He's also analyzed Forbes global billionaire data to probe the propensity of economic elites, quote unquote, to immigrate outside the nations of their birth. Quote, by the time people reach the peak of their careers and enter the top tax brackets of their states and countries, many have become embedded elites, unquote. His research shows, and quote again, places are sticky. When you achieve success in a place, it becomes hard to leave. Other researchers see similar dynamics at play. Quote, many state lawmakers overestimate how sensitive rich people are to a few percentage points difference in the state tax rate, unquote, as Carl Davis of the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy noted last fall. Differences in state tax rates on high incomes can often amount to much more than a few points. Deep pockets in Florida, for instance, may get a free pass at tax time, but their counterparts who call New York home face a 10.9% tax rate on income over 25 million. Those in that income bracket who live in New York City face an additional 3.876% levy on income above that level, bringing their total top tax bracket tax rate to 14.776%. Yet the state of New York, a new Fiscal Policy Institute report points out, has actually gained millionaires, and some three-quarters of the rich who left New York have relocated in Connecticut, New Jersey, and other high-tax jurisdictions. The most vivid evidence that our richest are not fleeing en masse from higher tax places, that evidence is coming from the luxury real estate market in 2023's fourth quarter. Mansion Globe reported last week New York City saw a 9% annual jump in the sales of residential properties in the $20 million plus price range. The total value of the quarter's luxury home sales, notes Corey Napier, the director of research at the Sargent Realty Giant, topped 530 million, a significant 37.6% jump from last year's volume. Right-wing champions of the richest among us simply ignore statistics along this line. They continue to insist that taxes on the rich are running far too high in far too many places. Our actual tax time reality, taxes on our rich in no places are running high enough. Even those jurisdictions that now tax the rich at our nation's highest tax rate leaves our wealthiest after taxes still fabulously wealthy. That creates real problems for the rest of us. In trendy metro areas, our most affluent bid up the cost of real estate in the process of making housing increasingly unaffordable for moderate and low-income households. The same Fiscal Policy Institute study that shows that higher tax rates on New York's top 1% are not driving those affluents away indicates that average families are increasingly finding the city unaffordable and making their exit. Quote, in 2022, the most recent year data was available, as the New York Times notes, quote, the richest New Yorkers left the state at far lower rates than all other income tax groups, unquote. We need to fine-tune our tax the rich focus. We need to do more than tax high incomes. We need, to limit them. And I agree very much with this post. Obviously, with Sam Pizzagatti, we need to limit their incomes very, very badly. We need to tax the billionaires so heavily that whatever state they live in and whatever the tax rates in those states will not matter, because the federal taxes they face are going to leave them less than a billionaire in a finite amount of time. We need to get rid of our billionaires, and we need to do it through taxation. And we need to see how they adjust, to that. And why is that the case? It is the case because the billionaires are a danger to our democracy. We see that in the open secrets records all the time. They can just play with the political system as they want to by buying politicians. A recent case in point, of course, is Bobby Kennedy. Now, Bobby Kennedy has this wonderful position when it comes to peace in Ukraine. He's all for it. He would stop the war quickly. He tells the right story when it comes to the causes, of the Ukraine war. He's understanding of the Russian position. He wants peace with the Russians, and the Chinese. When it comes to Israel, he still hasn't said that he disapproves of the genocide. He still hasn't said that as president, he would put strings on aid to Israel of various kinds, an obvious position for a presidential candidate, okay, to take. Why? My theory is because he has very big donors who are major supporters of Israel and don't want to see him do that, or he has prospects of getting large donations from very major donors. Uh, I'll be dealing more with Robert Kennedy's finances, okay, in coming days. Uh, there's another recent article that goes through who his major contributors are. But of course, one major contributor is Timothy Mellon. And it's clear now that in various contributions, he has given something like $20 million to the Kennedy Super PAC, 7 million of which was spent on that Super Bowl ad. Now, we have to seriously look at the correspondence of Timothy Mellon's political positions and Robert F. Kennedy's political positions. We really do, especially when it comes to his position, okay, on Israel. We really need to look at that. There are other big contributors. He has someone who contributed $3 million to him. We have to check that out, okay, as well. But to go back to the point of this article, it is not the case that states that raise taxes on the rich are worse off because a few billionaires leave those states. Okay. It is the case in particular that the state of Washington is very much very much benefiting from the 7% tax on long-term capital gains in excess of 250,000, in spite of Jeff Bezos' plans, okay, to leave the state. Okay, subtracting their losses from his leaving, but adding what they're gaining on the 7% tax leaves them in a much better net position. And that is very important for us to remember and very important for us to note. Take a look at any comments you might have. There's Dawn Foster. Hi, Dawn. I'm happy to see you here. If you have any comments or questions, I'll be happy to entertain those, okay, at this point. I'll give you a couple of minutes to reply, or others who are here. And if not, I will end the stream. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Don, for being here. And thank you for the other person who's here right now. I appreciate that. Uh, I'll have two more streams today. Dawn says, I don't think people understand MMT. I'm sure that's true. And in some of my streams, I go into MMT somewhat. In fact, I'll be doing another stream but today uh, where it's going to be my third stream of the day. I have another stream coming up at 8 o'clock, and I have one coming up at 8:30. In my 8:30 stream, I will be calling Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a macroeconomic moron, and I will be explaining why he is such, and that will be all about the fundamentals of MMT and his ignorance of those fundamentals. So if you're interested in MMT, you might want to come back for that one, Dawn. And if you're interested in more on taxing the rich, that's what my stream at 8 p.m. is going to be about. So I'll say goodbye now, and hopefully I'll see you later in the day.